We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Monday night, January 13th, 2025, as we bring you a new episode. The White Sox have been quiet since signing starting pitcher Martin Perez, as they are still rumored to be looking for a veteran shortstop to invite into spring training camp. Later this week, we'll hear about the White Sox international signees. For most of the baseball world, they received bad news when Japanese pitching phenom Roki Sasaki whittled down his list of teams that he's willing to sign with prior to January 21st deadline. The Los Angeles Dodgers, Toronto Blue Jays, and San Diego Padres made the final cut. We are already seeing reports from the Dominican Republic of these international teenage prospects that were rumored to already have handshake agreements in place with these teams, now are seeing their offers pulled. Could make this particular international signing period extra spicy if some of the top prospects suddenly become available. But in this episode, we see projection season get underway as FanGraphs has released their 2025 ZiPS projections for the Chicago White Sox. Joining me on the Sox Machine Podcast to discuss the 2025 ZiPS projections is our best friend of the show. From FanGraphs.com, it's Dan Szymborski. And hello, Dan. Thanks for coming back on the Sox Machine Podcast.
Hey, Josh. Thanks for welcoming on to what should be a sunny, optimistic hour or so.
Well, the obvious question to start, why does ZiPS hate the White Sox?
Well, I guess it would come down to the players on the White Sox mostly, which is, I guess, most of the team. There's a Robert Jr. in center field, and then there's everyone else. Yeah, everyone else. It's not. Everyone else is a problem.
It's not very rosy. And for podcast listeners, if you haven't gotten a chance to check it out, you can go to FanGraphs.com. Dan has the full write-up and also releases projections, and we'll run it down here in this episode. Before we get into the position players and pitchers, though, you did write in your summary of the 2025 ZiPS projections that you are still expecting a jump in wins for the White Sox in 2025. And it sounds like in your writing that ZiPS is projecting the 2025 White Sox team to be around 60-61 wins, which is a significant improvement from what we saw in 2024. Why the jump in win total?
Well, it's really, really, really hard to lose 121 games. There's a reason that you don't see even bad teams approach that very often, because you basically have to have everything go wrong. And the White Sox pretty much had everything go wrong. They had very few, of those, small sample size surprises in the positive direction. Pretty much everyone they stuck in kind of stunk last year. So if you made this roster play the 2024 season over like a million times, which I think is kind of one of the circles of hell in Dante's Inferno to watch the White Sox play baseball forever. The 2024 White Sox, they'd probably win more than 41 games. It's probably a 50-win team that had a bad season, which really isn't really that sunny, but at least it wouldn't be historically awful.
True. It wouldn't have the New York Times and all the national media people visiting the White Sox in their final homestand of the 2024 season, looking to witness history. They had to wait until Detroit to finally see it. To address your final point in your piece when summarizing the White Sox, you would recommend the White Sox to still finish in the bottom of Major League Baseball record-wise to give themselves a chance to accumulate more talent, better shot of maybe gaining the number 1 overall pick next year. Would that change of obtaining more impact talent should that be a greater focus for the White Sox in 2025 than, say, over the progress of their top prospect like Colson Montgomery? And I ask it this way, Dan, because do they have enough talent in the current pipeline to take advantage and support their top prospects in Colson Montgomery and Kyle Teal on the position player side and Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz on the pitching side?
I think really, when you look at it, the focus of the White Sox should be adding talent wherever they could get it, whether it's one of the top prospects advancing through the minors quickly, whether it's some cast-off interesting picture with upside. I think Burrow is kind of an example of that guy. You want the team to be relentlessly future focused. Any player who the White Sox have no hope of being on the team and contributing in 3 years should get 0 plate appearances or innings. This team should be taking lottery ticket after lottery ticket, because tomorrow's lottery ticket, no matter how long the odds, are better than yesterday's lottery ticket that didn't win. I don't know if the organization has that kind of focus, unfortunately. This was a team that I really don't think they knew they were this bad coming into the season. Now, no one really thought they were 120 loss bad, but I got the impression that they kind of thought they were fringe wildcard contenders. That's the impression I got. I could be wrong. I don't have the ability to read hearts, which would be a strange thing for a stat guy to be able to do. Don't really have a lot of confidence in the organization to have that kind of focus and how to actually achieve the desired focus.
Well, before we get into the position groups, the position players and the pitchers, their ZiPS projections, we got a couple of questions from our Patreon supporters, which you can be a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/SoxMachine. Marco wrote to us, Dan, what percentile outcome were the White Sox for their team WAR last year in 2024 relative to their preseason projections? Did we watch like the 1% projection of the 2024 White Sox?
I had them about 2% to do this. So it was always a possibility, but given the roster, it didn't look like. Now, what I haven't done is gone back and suggest and projected the season with the actual distribution of players who actually played to see if that changes things. Because, let's just say there were some guys who did not expect to play as much as actually did that from the projections. That might make that a little more likely, but I still think it was one of those lucky seasons, just not the good kind of luck.
And then Tom Skelton wrote to us, if the 2025 White Sox played exactly according to the ZiPS projections, would they be in danger of losing 121 games again?
It would be it would be kind of difficult to do that again, even though this team kind of looks a little worse at the start of the season. The theoretical start of the season, obviously, we have a couple months to go. It looks worse than it did last year, but they didn't really look like a 120 loss team last year, if that makes sense. They're probably better than that, and it's probably still an unlikely result, and it's still going to be, there'll be probably a single-digit percentage. I don't want to put something concrete in that until we get closer to the season. We know with more certainty what the rosters will look like, especially in the AL Central. Also, I'll probably squeeze a piece out of that subject now that I think of it.
Now let's talk about the position players, and it starts with Luis Robert Jr. As ZiPS is projecting Robert, his 50th percentile projection, by the way, to be around 2.4 WAR. From what we were hearing at the winter meetings and post-winter meetings is that the White Sox are hoping that Robert has a strong first half, that other teams, especially contenders, would be willing to trade for Luis Robert. If Luis Robert if he suffers injuries or has a bad first half, it's going to be really difficult for the White Sox financially to justify picking up his club options especially for the 2026 season, which is valued at $20 million. So this is a really critical year for Luis Robert, Dan. And again, the White Sox are hoping the best, that he really bounces back in the first half. Do you think that if that does happen and Robert plays at an all-star level in the first half, can they get anything valuable back for Luis Robert in a trade, knowing that it's just club options and they're not guaranteed years for $20 million in 2026 and 2027?
If he plays well, not even necessarily as well as he did in 2023, I think they would get quite a bit for him. It's right now, obviously they would not, because there's just so much uncertainty. But I think that when you look at his contract, that his value would rebound fairly quickly, because, 20 million club options, two of them, 2 years and 40 is a lot worse than, them being actual options. And I think the team would look at them pretty promising, especially if he looks like he doesn't have to do much to be worth 240. Let's just say that. And the buyouts are not significant. I believe they're $2 million each offhand. Yeah. So I think a team would pay quite a bit, not as much as 2023. I said it before, and I'll say it again. After the 2023 season, when they lost 101 games, and it would have needed a miracle to turn this team around, as opposed to what they actually did was just kind of patch some holes and expect magic to happen, I think that was the optimal time to trade him. Obviously, you want to keep him with your franchise, but if you cannot win, there's just not a great deal of point of having him. And he might thrive also in another organization. There's a lot of problems with the organization. I don't want to really say who until we know what the extent of his bounce back season is and his health is, but I think they would get significant prospects in return still.
One of the pleasant surprises in the 2025 ZiPS projections is how much ZiPS likes Chase Meidroth, who the White Sox just acquired from the Boston Red Sox in the Garrett Crochet trade. ZiPS is projecting a 50th percentile slash line of a 248 batting average, a 361 on base percentage, which would be like a godsend for this White Sox organization, but a 340 slugging, which is not impressive. I assume that ZiPS likes Meidroth because of his on-base and second base defensive skills. And with that being said, should the White Sox roll with Meidroth to start at second base on opening day, as they're hoping to have some type of competition during spring training for that position?
I think they're kind of in a weird position where, it's in the White Sox interest to play service time games. I don't like to actually propose that because it's kind of scummy to do that, just because it's a really hard to prove thing. But I expect that even if they really, really like what they see in spring, they're going to keep him down in the minors for a month because this is the way it works. ZiPS is normally pretty suspicious of guys who get so much of their value from walks, but he's not. He's solid otherwise as well. He can play a premium position. He probably doesn't have the arm for shortstop, I don't think. Although I don't know if that's necessarily the consensus. I'd have to actually not do this off the top of my head, but he can at least play second week, and he could probably play it adequately. Again, there are some differences of opinion there. And he hasn't developed power yet, but he's not like a zero. He's not Nick Punto, just to make a random player from the past.
That White Sox fans love. Yes, White Sox fans loved Nick Punto.
I like him a lot. He was a good pickup in the trade. And I think he's going to be, when he gets to the majors, he'll be one of the bright spots of the White Sox. He did get the second best WAR projection of any player on the team, although there's a little bit damning with faint praise there.
Yeah. And moving over to shortstop, as we record this, we're a month away from pitchers and catchers reporting to Glendale, Arizona. And as we speak, the White Sox internal competition at shortstop is Colson Montgomery and Brooks Baldwin. And during the winter meetings, Dan, Chris Getz alluded to us multiple times that they're going to give Colson Montgomery every opportunity to win the starting job in spring training to be the White Sox opening day shortstop. What does ZiPS make of Colson Montgomery after his very uneven 2024 season in AAA?
ZiPS has been all over the map with Montgomery, really since he was drafted. First, after 2022, ZiPS kind of wanted to wait and see. Then it said, 2023, we like that. He didn't play a ton, but when he did, he was really, really, really good. And then last year, that was a pretty bad AAA performance. And he's not old enough that it's like disastrous. He's not 24 or 25 when he put that up, but he's also not a 19 or a 20-year-old debuting in AAA. He was legitimately minus in AAA. Barely scratching a 700 OPS, even in the international league, is not good even for a shortstop prospect. The league had an ERA of just under 5 last year, and the international league tends to be the more pitching oriented of the AAA leagues. But given where the White Sox are and his upside, I do agree you have to give him every opportunity to win the job, because if the White Sox shortstop of the future is on the team, it's probably Montgomery. So I think you give him every chance to prove he's that guy.
We'll see. Again, the White Sox may want to provide a non-roster invitee to a veteran shortstop just to give them some type of security. But as we record this again, the internal competition is between Colson Montgomery and Brooks Baldwin at shortstop.
I really don't like the idea if they do that. I really hope they don't, because if Montgomery doesn't get the job, then I think Baldwin should get every opportunity to have the job, just to see what he can do.
Got it. Okay.
Lottery ticket. He's not the prospect that Montgomery is, of course, but you might as well, because he's not 30.
So not signing someone like Nick Ahmed, not bringing back Paul DeYoung. You would stick with the Colson Montgomery versus Brooks Baldwin.
I want people who have not voted in 2 presidential elections. If you voted in 2 presidential elections, the White Sox should not sign you for any reason, unless it's like a hostage situation. And then it depends how much you like your family.
This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Whether you're just starting out or you're managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything from products to content to time, all in one place and all on your terms. Introducing Design Intelligence from Squarespace, combining 2 decades of industry-leading design expertise with cutting-edge AI technology to unlock your strongest creative potential. They've also got Squarespace Payments. That's the easiest way to manage your payments, all in one place with Squarespace. Onboarding is fast and simple, and you can get started with just a few clicks and start receiving payments right away. You can also connect major social and multimedia accounts to your website with just a few clicks as icons, direct links, or embedded feeds, so you can build that visitor trust while updating content only where you need it. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, squarespace.com/Blue Wire to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
The NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
So to follow up something you said earlier, the White Sox should not be giving a lot of playing time to players that are not going to matter to this franchise in 3 years. Let's talk about the Andrews, Andrew Benintendi and Andrew Vaughn. Now, offensively, it's not amazing, but ZiPS is projecting a 745 OPS for Benintendi with 14 home runs. That's a 109 OPS plus. That's above league average. And Andrew Vaughn at 743 OPS with a 107 OPS plus with 21 homers and 76 RBIs. Again, that's the 50th percentile projection for Andrew Vaughn. But neither Benintendi or Vaughn are projected to be close to 2 WAR. Benintendi at 1.2 WAR and Vaughn at 1 WAR. If you were advising the White Sox, Dan, how would you handle Andrew Benintendi and Andrew Vaughn in 2025?
They would not be starting, especially Benintendi. I know people will say he did have a good second half of the season, and he did, but that doesn't really mean all that much. First half, second half, that doesn't really mean much in the sense of projections. Like say, yeah, he had an 830 something OPS in the second half, but it was sub 600 in the first half of the season, which was more at bats to the second half. He's not a 21-year-old learning how to play baseball. This is you don't want to kind of reach on that. And at the end of the day, if he hits that projection, it's like, who cares? It doesn't tell the White Sox anything about the team that they don't already know. It doesn't get them a good player. No one is going to give anything of significance for Benintendi with a 95 OPS plus. It's just not going to happen. So I just don't see the purpose of the White Sox spending time with Benintendi, even if the player they replace him is superior, but that player might have an actual future with the White Sox, which Benintendi really doesn't. Yeah, he signed for 3 years, but that money is gone. It's just not coming back.
Unless they can magically unload it. But I think I'm with you, Dan. He's going to need to have like a 900 OPS coming to the All-Star break, and somebody being very desperate, needing an outfielder or believing they could fix Benintendi in a way the White Sox have not. I'm kind of in the line of Benintendi, if he's going to get playing time for the White Sox, should be DH because he's an awful left fielder. But Andrew Vaughn is also an awful first baseman defensively because big part of it, he's undersized, so it limits his range and his ability to make up for errant throws or maybe off-target throws from the other side of the infield. He doesn't really give a boost to his fellow shortstops and third basemen when it comes to defensive value, but you only have one DH spot. So I'm kind of thinking if opening day's next week, I don't think Will Venable is going to bench Andrew Benintendi, Dan. So I'd rather have Benintendi be the DH, and I guess that means Vaughn at first base if both must be in the lineup.
Yeah, but even with Vaughn, it's really hard to see what he's going to do in Chicago at this point, because I mean, I believe that there's something been there for a while, but can you really expect the White Sox to be the team that find it? I think it would have been almost kinder to him to non-tender him and and if there's something there, let the Dodgers or Astros or Guardians or someone fix him. I don't think any team is going to trade for that possibility because he's making nearly $6 million this upcoming season. But it almost would have been nice because whatever he has, I don't think the White Sox have any idea how to activate it. His whole developmental cycle was really, really weird. And I know we talked about this like 5 years ago, but the way they used him and just rushed him, I mean, they basically had him skip through the minors. And obviously the COVID season had something to do with that. But after he was drafted, I mean, he did not really even hit that crazily good for someone who you think is going to instantly hit the majors. I mean, he had an 800-something OPS in his professional debut, and then a missed season in 2020, and then 2021, when he actually did pretty well considering he basically never learned how to hit minor league pitching.
Yeah, and playing out of position.
Yeah,
yeah.
And just let the poor guy play somewhere else.
Well, another conversation we're going to be having during the spring training. Again, back to the whole, you only have one DH spot. Miguel Vargas. Now, he's going to get some run during spring training because he's out of options, and he was given the offseason task to add more muscle so he can regain some of the power lost after the trade from the Los Angeles Dodgers. ZiPS is not crazy about Vargas. ZiPS would be projected a 103 OPS plus as the 50th percentile projection for Vargas with a 236 batting average, a 326 on base percentage, a below 400 slugging, which is, again, not good for someone who supposedly their best attribute is power. And with a projection of just 15 homers for Miguel Vargas, Again, you can only have one DH per game, Dan. So what's the best way of handling a Miguel Vargas who's out of options?
I think you do play him at third base simply because if he's not a third baseman, he's not really a starter. I don't think his offense is going to improve enough to really handle an offense primary position like DH or first baseman. I just don't think he has that amount of offensive upside. So when you ask some, like, what is the scenario in which Miguel Vargas is a good starter for the White Sox? I can't see that DH being him ever being a good DH, but if he can handle the position we just left there, he might hit enough if he can play an adequate enough third base. Obviously, we don't know if he will, but I think that gives him the best chance of being a future player. And I think you put players in the best position to succeed. You make him just a part-time DH. It's like, at that point, okay, who cares? If you don't have anything that you're going to do with it, I mean, it's like buying like a Steinway grand piano and just playing chopsticks on it. It's like, if you're not going to use it to play it, why did you get it? And if you don't want it, then let someone else have it. I don't know. I just don't see him hitting enough to be a DH. Now, he will hit a lot better than he did last year, which was absolutely brutal with the White Sox. I mean, was his WRC plus even positive? Oh, he had a 14 OPS plus with the White Sox.
Yeah. Well, so on that topic with Vargas, okay, so you would have Vargas play third base. The White Sox signed Josh Rojas. They signed Mike Tauchman, and they signed Austin Slater. So kind of going full circle on the position player front, I'm going to assume, Dan, you're not crazy about these types of signings, and are they pointless for the White Sox and what they're trying to achieve? I
think they're absolutely pointless. I like all those guys have uses, but they have uses on teams with hope. As we said, we talked about before this podcast, this was not going to be the sunniest 60 minutes I've ever done with you. I just don't see the purpose they are. I don't think winning 59 games instead of 54 games does anything for the White Sox future at this point. And what are you going to learn about the future White Sox from playing Mike Tauchman? You're going to learn nothing about them. If he has a big season, he'll just go somewhere else next year. He's not going to be in the team in 4 years. I don't think that anyone's going to trade a great prospect for Mike Tauchman. I mean, flipping him, doesn't make sense. It's not like you're flipping a house. It's like you got a free bunch of grapes at the grocery store and you plan on flipping them in your neighborhood. Like no one's buying your grapes, like your loose grapes that you have in your pocket. That analogy doesn't quite make that much sense, but it's just kind of frustrating because it doesn't seem to connect with any of the White Sox organizational goals. I'm not sure if they even have coherent goals that make sense. I'd love to kind of open up their brains a little and just see just what the underlying thought is.
Well, they did hire Ryan Fuller, the former Baltimore Orioles hitting coach, to be the director of hitting, to be the opposite of Brian Bannister. So maybe there's some instant magic from Fuller taking a look at the White Sox hitters and they do perform better.
But if they do have magic, don't you want them to execute that magic on the guys who are part of the future? Like getting the most out of Mike Tauchman or Josh Rojas doesn't really mean much.
No, the magic needs to be on Colson Montgomery, Kyle Teal, Edgar Caro, maybe Andrew Vaughn, since you could still have him theoretically next year. And Luis Robert, if you can help fix Luis Robert to have a monster first half.
Yeah, if you have a magician, like you have them fighting the Balrog, like Gandalf did. Yeah. You don't just say, "Oh, we have a powerful magician." Okay, you just guard the Shire while we go do our thing. Just stay back here and make sure no one breaks into the house while I'm gone.
Let's say we did have this magic ability and we were a genie, Dan, and we told Ryan Fuller, you get 3 wishes, 3 players that will increase their offensive production by 25% in 2025. Who would be the 3 White Sox position players on this roster that, if you were Ryan Fuller, that you would use that magic spell to improve their offensive production by 25%?
I think first, I think getting the uncertainty out of Colson Montgomery would be very helpful to the team. Make him the shortstop of the future. I think use another of your wild card magic moments on Kyle Teal. Let's get that catcher spot nailed down so we don't have to do auditions and throw everything at the wall and see which one of the catchers sticks. And I think maybe you do that with Brian Ramos and just make him the third baseman.
All right. Let us know.
Don't use the magic stick on Andrew Benintendi if if there's any magic, because I don't know. Maybe I'm being mean, but I've always been kind of iffy on the organization itself, and they really haven't earned many plaudits in the last 2 years. Let's just say, I'm sure that your viewership, readership, listenership probably isn't super high on them either.
Well, at least on the hitting side, we're all waiting to see, and hopefully Ryan Fuller can provide some magic. But podcast listeners, let us know if you could pick 3 White Sox position players to improve their offensive production by 25%, which of the 3 would you pick? I think that would be an interesting conversation down in the comments. The one area that did surprise us last year was how much Brian Bannister, as a director of pitching, was able to get out of some guys. And one of those guys is Jonathan Cannon. And this is where, when the ZiPS projections came out, the most conversation so far, Dan, on Sox Machine for our readers and listeners is the disappointment that ZiPS is not crazy about Jonathan Cannon, because Cannon did pitch well, at least to unforeseen expectations, not knowing if he was going to pitch a lot for the 2024 White Sox. But when he came in, there was some hope that, hey, at least he could be a back-end starter. And when you look at the 80th percentile projections, again, you can go to fangraphs.com to see this. There are 2 pitchers for the White Sox that ZiPS thinks could be better than 2 WAR. And that's recent free agent signing Martin Perez. But as we said in our previous podcast episode, if Perez pitches well in the first half, he's gone. And Jonathan Cannon. Jude Thorpe, Davis Martin, Sean Burke, Bryce Wilson, who the White Sox also signed, their 80th percentile projections do not exceed 2 WAR. So when you look at this current starting rotation for the Chicago White Sox, it looks like Brian Bannister still has a pretty uphill battle to try to find some major league starters that could fit this. We want to be good within 3-year window, right, Dan?
Yeah, the next 3 years are going to be kind of bleak. The thing with Cannon is that he's obviously doesn't have a lot of professional experience so far. I mean, he was a 3rd rounder in 2022. Am I getting that right? 2022. Yes. But he's also hasn't really mastered punching out batters, even in the minors. He was not a big strikeout guy in the minors. He wasn't really in the majors. It's really hard to be successful in the majors these days, striking out 6 or 7 batters a game. There's just too many guys who can punish you. Everything. You don't have a position where there's no like shortstop or second base easy passes anymore in 2024, or really the last 15 years or so. It's hard when you're only striking out those guys. And the peripheral stats weren't great. The stuff stats weren't that great either, except for his slider. I think that there's still hope for him. I mean, he's not an old pitcher, and pitchers are a little more volatile than batters, both good and bad. But I mean, I would just say, okay, he's going to be a guy in 2 or 3 years. But given his age and his potential, you do give him as much of a look as you can.
And we did get that question from one of our Patreon supporters, Steven Millark, who wrote to us, what are the 3-year ZiPS projections for Davis Martin, Sean Burke, and Jonathan Cannon? Are these projections rosy? Because Davis Martin, on your little graph, you had him at 1.6 WAR. Again, his 80th percentile does not exceed 2 WAR, but the dart, that's what we call him. We view him as like a number 5 starter. Like, we know that he doesn't have the stuff to lead a rotation. Are the only guys the White Sox have right now that ZiPS is looking at for their entire farm system? Is it just Noah Schultz and recent first-round draftee Hagen Smith as guys that could be projected frontline starters?
When you talk frontline starters,
better than 3 WAR.
Yeah, I think I don't have the probability exactly of it in front of me, but Schultz is the guy who is most likely to do that. I mean, he even gets a pretty decent projection now, and he's not quite ready for the majors yet. He's the best when it comes to talking about a 3-win season. ZiPS does not really see much upside for Davis Martin. It thinks that he could be a pretty decent inning eater. If he can show he can throw 140, 150 innings, he has some value to this team because games have to end at some point. And only your pitching staff can do that.
Right.
A bad offense ends the game quicker, but a terrible pitching staff extends the game much longer. I mean, I don't think that anyone wants to watch a White Sox Oakland A's 4-hour game in 2025. The viewership would actually be negative. People would they would take away views from games people previously watched during that. Davis Martin, there's a little more, with Sean Burke, there's a little more hope when you talk about upside, but Schultz and Thorpe are the players close to the majors now that ZiPS sees with significant upside, and Cannon less so. ZiPS does have Cannon approaching being a league average pitcher in a couple years, which again also has value, but it just doesn't see him as having the same upsides as Schultz or Thorpe.
Got it. So to replace Garrett Crochet, we're still waiting, folks, for Noah Schultz, or again, we'll be watching Hagen Smith pitch professionally for the first time since being drafted from Arkansas in the first round last year. Fingers crossed that those two can develop into being frontline starters, as Davis Martin, Sean Burke, and Jonathan Cannon probably, maybe at best, back in rotation starters. Hopefully Brian Bannister can continue to unlock some of their attributes and get better production this upcoming season. But another uphill battle, and I laugh a little bit because pitching coach Ethan Katz and Bannister, they got a lot of work to do when looking at this reliever projection. Dan, am I reading this right? Negative 1.6 for the entire White Sox bullpen, and you wrote in FanGraphs this is the worst projected outcome for a reliever, for a group of relievers, a bullpen preseason for ZiPS. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct. I could tell the projection was bad when the best ERA is projected by Penn Murphy, who hasn't really pitched since fully healthy since 2022. And who I totally forgot was claimed on waivers a couple months ago. By the time I looked at the projections, I thought, oh, how did he? Oh, that's right. He was on waivers. I thought he was. It's not a good situation. And really, outside of Baroa, there are not really a whole bunch of arms that you think could necessarily be unlocked. I think that no matter how much you like Bannister, if you think of him like a world-class chef or something, you have to give him some ingredients.
Right.
You can't have this Top Chef challenge where you give the contestants styrofoam peanuts to cook with, and they have to base a dish around styrofoam peanuts. It just doesn't work that way. I think that they should be in the market for every live arm that hits waivers that has no idea where the home plate is and try to fix them. That's what the Orioles did. That's how they got Felix Bautista. That's how they built their bullpen. So hopefully there's some of that in their DNA. But again, I think Baroa is fascinating because he does have 2+ pitches. No idea what to do with them. But, I just don't see there's not a lot of marble there to carve into Greek sculptures of Trevor Hoffman.
So the pitching side, not rosy for the White Sox, and the position player side, also not a rosy projection. The White Sox, again, are dealing with the first-time manager as well. They hired Will Venable to take over from Pedro Grifol. Grady Sizemore is still part of the coaching staff for the Chicago White Sox as he served as the interim manager last year. Dan, how should we grade Will Venable then? Looking at this projected roster and looking at the ZiPS projections, it's not like we're giving him a pass on the 2025 season, but I'm kind of struggling. What is the best way to watch and critique and grade Will Venable in his managerial debut if this is the roster that he has?
I think you kind of grade him based on how he treats the players with upside? Does he put them in a position to succeed? Or does, and obviously the organization is going to have some input there because no manager is, gets to play dictator the way, Earl Weaver or Casey Stengel got to do. But if this team has an old average team age because they're playing guys like Rojas and Benintendi and all them, I think that his job is to try to get the players with talent as much time as possible to blossom. I think if it looks like the Rockies a few years ago, like when it took him forever to play Ryan McMahon, they blocked him with Ian Desmond and couldn't figure out how to get him at bats for a long time. They couldn't figure out what to do with Brendan Rodgers for a long time. They seemed to like Chris Getz, but gave him priority. But if the White Sox are like that, then it's a serious problem, and I think it would go to the manager. But if, he's able to fight for guys like Montgomery and Baldwin, and they get all the at-bats at shortstop, one or the other, then I think you're looking at a pretty good job. And it's kind of a thankless job because I don't think there's going to be a major comeback for the White Sox this year that gets him a Manager of the Year award or anything. This is a very, very hard team to manage. And it's kind of cruel that first-time managers tend to get the hardest spots to land.
Yeah.
Like when you're a great manager and they love you, you get the easiest things. Like, oh, you want to join the Dodgers? Like, sure. You want to join the Yankees? Okay. But the first time managers, like, oh, you fix the White Sox, you fix the Pirates, you make the Marlins good. It's like that's a tough order. And I don't envy him the task.
It is a tough order. And I think you bring up a good point. Like during spring training, when it comes to finalizing the opening day roster, I think that might have to be part of how we also view Chris Getz, who'll be entering his second year as a full-time general manager for the Chicago White Sox and the architect of this organization right now. And he's bringing in a lot of outside faces and outside voices for what was deemed a pretty insular operation for the Chicago White Sox. But I wonder how that conversation will unfold between Venable and Getz, because if Venable campaigns for Colson Montgomery to be the opening day shortstop, but if Getz wants to play the service time games and wants the veterans to play more of the games in April and May to see if there's any value that they can maybe unload in July, I wonder how that balances for the White Sox. Like, is this more of a conversation and topic we need to think about starting in August post-trade deadline if Chris Getz, the GM, is trying to get more trade assets to deal away versus what Will Venable, first-year manager, is trying to accomplish, Dan?
I think what it comes down to is I don't think that the trade assets have that much upside simply because, they're role players. No one's kind of in the Fetty position last year where he came back and was a complete unknown, I think, of what he could do after his year away in Korea. They haven't added anyone like that.
Got it.
And I think that if you get a veteran, then it should be a veteran that there's unknown upside from. Like, just to pick a random player. I don't know if he really counts as a veteran, but Edouard Julien from the Twins or something. He's a guy who has uncertain upside. He's not a veteran or anything, but it does seem that the Twins have soured on him a bit, and he's interesting. And a guy like that who you bring in, I think you do place priority over a prospect. I think that maybe you put him at third base, let Ramos play AAA, use Vargas elsewhere. But I think they have to seize opportunities as they come. And any veteran you get has to have just an upside that you can say in words and not sound crazy. Like if I told you, Josh, what's Josh Rojas's ceiling?
2-WAR.
Yeah.
A 680 OPS 2-WAR season because of his defense. Yeah. We talked about it in our last episode. It kind of sounds like Nicky Lopez 2.0 with the signing for the White Sox with Josh.
I think he's actually better than Nicky Lopez.
Yes. That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not like that trade a lot. A lot of people were very, very angry at me at the projection for Aaron Bummer to bounce back. Because, every time a pitcher has an ERA way worse than their FIP, people will always tell you why this time is different. And usually this time is not different. I thought Bummer was kind of like the prize of that trade. Not that he would have turned around the season, but
No, Getz just needed some players last year, and I don't even know how many are actually sticking around. Maybe Jared Schuster is the only one that will be left remaining for the White Sox from the Aaron Bummer trade of last year. And then to wrap up this episode, I just looked at the updated win total according to DraftKings Sportsbook. And DraftKings has updated their win total for the 2025 season for the White Sox. Again, a few podcasts ago, we mentioned that the over-under was 49.5. It is now up to 51.5 wins over-under for the White Sox in 2025. So, Dan, after our conversation about the Chicago White Sox and the ZiPS projections, are you still confident that they can exceed 52 wins in 2025?
I guess you would say define confident. Like if someone pulled a gun to my head and said that, like, how many, like, I'm in an alley, someone pulls out a gun to my head and demands to know how many wins the White Sox will get, I would say probably 57, 58 wins, somewhere in that range, which is a pretty big improvement.
It is.
I'd also wonder, like, why are you doing this to me? Someone points a gun and asks a baseball question, I'll give them any answer that they want. But I'm not. It could be worse. I would take the over in the bet, but I don't know if I would bet my house on it.
Well, my good friend Beef Loaf over at From the 108 and another White Sox blog put $1,000 on the White Sox over 49.5 wins.
1,000, that's...
Would you have made that bet?
I don't usually bet that much just because I'm a conservative person by nature and I like to sell data to sports books rather than play against the house. It's better to be... The best way to get paid by a sports book is to do stuff for the sports book. I would definitely take the over rather than the under. So see what an optimist I am. I'm saying that the White Sox are going to win 17 more games than last year.
There you go. Get excited, White Sox fans. You can read Dan's excellent work on FanGraphs.com, catch up on all the ZiPS projections he has been releasing for Major League Baseball this offseason. The Mets are a very fun ZiPS projection compared to the White Sox. Follow him on Twitter. He's at DZiPS, or if you migrated over to Blue Sky, he's at DZiPS.fangraphs.com. And Dan, as always, thank you again for putting in so much work and try to project or work with the ZiPS data to project the 2025 White Sox. And again, thank you for joining the Sox Machine podcast.
Always fun. Thanks for having me on.
That will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You could also listen and watch the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. Follow us on social media or on all the platforms, including Blue Sky, at Sox Machine. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh and follow Sox Machine beat reporter James Fegan at JR Fegan. If you enjoy our work and want full access of our coverage of the Chicago White Sox and Major League Baseball, you can sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. As you heard in this episode, our Patreon supporters got an opportunity to submit questions to Dan Szymborski. And if you like that opportunity to submit questions for future podcast guests and also want ad-free versions of both the podcast and the website, you can sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Monthly plans start at $5. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.